Chemical facilities can be hazardous to the environment, as well as human health, happiness, and safety. We know the negative effects of these facilities, but we don't tend to focus on who gets burdened by those effects. Environmental burdens are not shared equally, and the people who benefit from this keep it that way. To explore how and why this happens, let's first get some context. Let's talk about racism. Now, when we're talking about racism, we're not talking about old offensive relatives who ruin Thanksgiving, or rednecks who want the Confederacy back. We're talking about the centuries of colonization, brutality, unequal pay, segregation, and lack of social and political representation that have impacted people beyond their control and still persist to this day. And specifically, we're talking about two of its effects. One, the disproportionate concentration of wealth and social capital to white people, and two, the de facto segregation of people of color from white people in residential areas. With these two effects in mind, say a city or a municipality is approached by a company that wants to build a questionably designed chemical plant there and needs to find a building site. If the city tries to approve a site in the mostly rich, mostly white part of town, and remember that there is a rich white part of town because of de facto segregation, the city is met with fierce resistance. People call up their lawyers, go to town meetings, protest, and they are heard. And remember that they have expensive lawyers and political voices because of that disproportionate wealth and social capital. So then the city tries to approve a site in the mostly poor, mostly black and brown part of town, flip side of that segregation, and suddenly there's a lot less resistance. Not because the people here don't care about the children or the environment, everyone has a stake in that, but because historically they've been robbed of the resources or power to do so. Flip side of the wealth and social capital concentration. They aren't as listened to. Some are using most of their time and money just to get by. The plant gets approved. Because of the effects of racism, areas of municipalities with more people of color tend to keep receiving more hazardous chemical facilities. These areas become sacrifice zones, where health, safety, and happiness have been sacrificed by groups who don't bear the burden of that sacrifice. The Environmental Justice Health Alliance, or EJHA, has conducted a study on the effects of this phenomenon, called Life at the Fence Line. Analyzing 9 areas spread out across the U.S., it focuses on the conditions of residents in a 3-mile radius from hazardous chemical facilities, or fence line zones, as compared to those conditions in the entire area, including outside the fence line. In all 9 areas, the percentage of Black or Latino residents inside the fence line was significantly higher than for the entire area. In 7 out of 9 areas, the percentage of residents in poverty inside the fence line was significantly higher than for the entire area. In all 9 areas, the percentage of residents living in low-income or low-food access neighborhoods inside the fence line was significantly higher than for the entire area. And in 8 out of 9 areas, the potential for respiratory illness inside the fence line was significantly higher than for the entire area. This unequal, racially charged distribution of threats to ecological and human health is called environmental injustice. To end it, we must pursue environmental justice, the fair and logical prioritization of health, everyone's health, over the short-term profits of a few. Because as long as racism gives us an excuse to build unsafe chemical facilities and ignore the risks, unsafe chemical facilities will be built. Unless everyone everywhere can defend themselves against the chemical plants of today, there's no incentive to change our ways and build safe, productive, eco-friendly chemical plants of the future. To put a spin on a quote from Martin Luther King Jr., racial injustice anywhere is a threat to environmental justice everywhere. So how do we get to the point where we can change? How do we abolish the concept and practice of the sacrifice zone? How do we empower marginalized communities to speak up for their rights? How do we ensure that those in power listen to and act on all demands for justice? To do these things, we must, integrate municipalities and decision-making groups, and make accessibility to government not based on wealth or unearned resources. Integrating municipalities eliminates the potential for a key component of environmental injustice, the sacrifice zone. We can integrate municipalities by integrating housing price. Housing is usually grouped with similarly priced housing, which groups people of the same budget and often the same race together. Mixing up the housing prices deconcentrates the wealth, eliminating the potential for a sacrifice zone. County boards and similar decision-making groups need some integration too. When these groups are mostly or completely composed of members from the richest and whitest part of town, they tend to make decisions that only benefit one part of the community, whereas groups that more accurately reflect a municipality as a whole are more likely to think communally. To better integrate and diversify elected decision groups, we need to safeguard voting and campaigning for those with minimal time and resources. To safeguard voting, we can illegalize gerrymandering, make voting days a holiday, and make voter registration easy and available at all times. To safeguard campaigning, we can limit campaign expenditures so that those with a lot of money don't have a huge advantage over those with little money. Now to make the line of communication between the city and the decision group less based on wealth and power. Schools should teach young people how to march, petition, contact representatives, and make speeches so that everyone can participate in democracy. That way, the demands policymakers are hearing are not just coming from those with expensive lawyers or inherited social capital, but those with the best ideas. We can imagine cleaner, safer, better chemical facilities, but we'll never implement them if we force marginalized communities to shoulder the burden of the status quo. Racism supports environmental destruction, but also our own laziness. Remove that support, and all our ideas for chemical facilities that have a positive impact on the world are suddenly possible, and we only have to work together to build them.